I spoke with Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman about Ukraine and the escalating diplomatic clash now with Russia over war crimes. Madam Secretary, thank you so much for being with us. Very difficult times right now between the U.S. and Russia over Ukraine. Now, Russia says that they summoned our ambassador in Moscow and basically threatened him with breaking relations because the president called Vladimir Putin a war criminal. What's our response?
Well, our response is that Vladimir Putin has been doing horrible things to the people of Ukraine. There's no one who watches your program or anything else that's on television that doesn't see one horrific incident after another. We've all watched the siege of Mariupol. We've all watched the bravery of the Ukrainian people. I heard a story today, Andrea, of a 96-year-old man who survived the Holocaust and was killed by Vladimir Putin's war of choice and war of carnage. I think that we all have seen what we have seen. We know what's happening, and Vladimir Putin is responsible.
If Russia were to break relations with the U.S., wouldn't that mean closing our embassy?
It may indeed mean closing our embassy. I don't want to get ahead of threats or hypotheticals here. We think it's important always to maintain diplomatic relationships because that's a method of communications, and that's particularly critical in this circumstance. But that said, I think that what we're seeing by that message, if that is indeed what's been conveyed to Ambassador Sullivan this morning, you're ahead of me on that, it is just shows how desperate President Putin is becoming because his military has not operated in the way he'd hoped. He certainly was not received with open arms, which is what he told the Russian people. President Zelensky, the people of Ukraine are just resilient, extraordinary, and are going to keep defending their sovereignty, their territorial integrity, and the right to make their own choices about their future. We stand united with them in helping them in every way we can by providing military assistance, of course, through weapons, as have many, many, many other countries, as well as humanitarian assistance, while at the same time imposing costs on Vladimir Putin so that he thinks and perhaps will change his calculus and de-escalate and move for peace.
Just for context here, I don't believe that any time during the Cold War, from the Cuban Missile Crisis through Ronald Reagan calling the former Soviet Union an evil empire, I don't think they ever threatened to break diplomatic relations or suggested that this was the first step towards severing relations.
Well, they certainly didn't do that during the Cold War, as you correctly note. We've been having a very tough time in terms of our embassy staff and personnel for many months, even before the invasion in Ukraine, where, in fact, we were no longer allowed to have locally employed staff. We had to get our own support staff. Very, very stressful relationship. I hope that President Putin doesn't take this step. It would not be to his advantage, and it would not be in his interest. But he keeps making decisions that are not in his interest. The ruble is almost worthless. The stock market has been closed for some time. The economy is hurting badly. People cannot get what they want in the stores. And the Russian people should know the truth, that this was a choice by Vladimir Putin. Ukraine was not threatening Russia in any way whatsoever. This is not a war against the Russian people. This is a war of choice that their president made on their behalf and to their disadvantage and to the horror of the entire world.
What would the U.S. do if Russia were to use chemical weapons against the people of Ukraine, the way they have used chemical and biological weapons before and supported Assad in Syria of doing same?
Well, this will certainly be on the agenda when the president travels to Brussels later this week and then on to Poland. He will be meeting with NATO allies, with the European Council, and with the G7. And our concern about the use of chemical and biological weapons will certainly be on that agenda. We are very concerned that President Putin may decide to do this out of desperation. He certainly has used these weapons in the past on individuals to attempt assassinations by poisoning people in support of Assad's brutality in Syria. So we are quite concerned about this. And President has said, Secretary Blinken has said, we have all said in our discussions with the media that there will be severe costs to Russia should they take such a horrible action.
The NATO leader, Jens Stoltenberg, said yesterday on Meet the Press that as horrible as that would be, that the real focus of NATO has to be to prevent a wider war between NATO and Russia. But is the use of chemical weapons a red line for the United States?
I think the use of chemical weapons is of great concern to the entire world. We have all said that the use of chemical and biological weapons is unacceptable in a modern age, unacceptable in history, of course, but certainly today. We have said that this is something that no country should do. What we have seen is Vladimir Putin put out a pretext saying that Ukraine has such weapons, that the United States has such weapons. This is completely inaccurate. We're trying to convey that to the Russian people so they know the truth. The only country that possesses such weapons in this environment in which we're currently in is Russia. And they must not use them, and there will be severe consequences should they do so.
Have you confirmed that the Russians have taken people from Mariupol, including many children, to Russia?
We have heard those reports, Andrea. We have not yet been able to fully confirm them. But there is no question there is enormous concern and certainly a lot of anecdotal evidence that people have been, quote unquote, deported to Russia. But look, there's no one who watches what's happening in Mariupol. Bombs every 10 minutes is being reported in Mariupol. We have seen the horrifying attack on a maternity hospital in Mariupol where people have died, women and their unborn children almost ready to give birth have died. We have seen terrible attacks in Ukraine against an art school, against people in their own residences. The civilian attacks are why the president, the Secretary of State, myself included, have said, as an individual, as a person, we believe these are war crimes. We are doing the legal analysis and working very quickly to ensure that we have the evidence that shows intentionality, which would meet the legal threshold of a war crime.
And finally, what message do you have for Ukrainian Americans who are desperate to reach loved ones and potentially get them out of refugee camps, get them here, and get them into the United States, but can't get them in because of our restrictions on asylum, particularly the restrictions during COVID?
Look, all of us just feel terrible watching over 3 million refugees leaving Ukraine, many of them women and children, leaving behind their husbands, their fathers, their brothers, everyone, leaving their community behind. Many want to stay in Europe because they want to return to Ukraine. We are looking very quickly, as fast as we can, at what we can do to ensure family reunification, those cases where there are communities and Americans here who want to bring their family members over. We hope to have some ways forward to help people out as soon as we possibly can.
Deputy Secretary Wendy Sherman, thank you very much. We really appreciate your being with us today.